I would like to have like a year in review sort of situation where we talk about the my favorite games of 2022, my personal picks, and always I do not have a specific tie that the games of 2022 had to come out in 2022. It's very weird. I mostly go for like the games that I played this year and which ones that I personally like the most. If not, they can be new games, they can be old games and stuff like that. Revisits do actually count. So I'd like to give like kind of a nomination to this game. Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter Sunbreak might actually take the first spot because we essentially learned how this game is so much substantially better on proper hardware, right? There was a moment where Monster Hunter Rise was like, oh, this is awesome, like there's so much like you can do in the game, and then the Switch version sort of leaves me a little reluctant because we had a good idea the game would come out on PC in some time, and then it eventually did. I feel like I have to give a proper nomination personally to Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak because they did come out this year. I really enjoyed this game, and I feel like it's more replayable. I actually replayed it, by the way. I actually went through the entirety of the early game again because I did enjoy it, and that is something I can't say about Monster Hunter World. Even though I think I like Monster Hunter World a little bit more, I think the gameplay of Rise is so much better than World that I severely enjoyed it. And World was like a huge game. I don't think there's any game outside of maybe Mortal Kombat X that I put more time into in the past like 7 years has been MKX and like Monster Hunter World, like no kidding. And even though Rise didn't end up being as much, I really enjoyed it. All the weapons seemed absolutely ridiculous. Everything in the game felt like it was insanely overpowered. And they eventually added stronger weapons and stronger enemies and stuff like that to the game that did make it a bit more challenging because they had to balance that out. I feel like that happened eventually in Sunbreak, you know, where Sunbreak was the game where they're like, oh yeah, you know, you can get a proper challenge even though your characters are ridiculously kitted. Like you are so friggin' OP in this game. It's absolutely insane. But the problem with Monster Hunter Rise, right, even though it is one of my personal takes of Game of the Year, this game looks bad. And it doesn't look bad when you look at it. It looks fine when you look at it. But when you go back and you look at a game like Monster Hunter World, it actually looks bad. You're like, oh man, yeah, World was good looking, right? You have a game that's being made pretty much from Switch hardware and then up-res, right? With some slightly better textures and shit. But the overall like geometry of the game is pretty low. And the lighting especially when you compare it to Monster Hunter World, like I said. It's brutal, man. Like I went back and I looked at Monster Hunter World and I was like, fuck, this game is beautiful. I don't want to play it. This game is absolutely beautiful. Like it's so much better looking than Monster Hunter Rise. I don't want to play it. Like, and that's the issue, is that we very briefly went back and fired up the PlayStation 4 version of World and realized how great it looks. I felt like a literal fish out of water in comparison to this game because you could do so much less stuff. Like, I'm like, wait a minute, what can I even, like, oh my God, dude, Great Sword is so basic in this game. Like, oh my God. And it's like, in comparison to previous games, World got a lot more stuff as well. So, anyway, I think Rise is great. I think if I had to give it a nomination of my top games of the year, I think Monster Hunter Rise / Sunbreak on PC definitely get a spot for me because it's more Monster Hunter and it was even technically even better than before. Do I give Asura's Wrath a nomination? Do I think I might. I actually think I might give Asura's Wrath one of my joke nominations for one of my personal like games of the year, only because we had not played it in so long that no kidding, I realized how good it is and also how bad it is, right? Also like all the issues that come as a result of a game designed the way it was, came out the way it was, and was essentially not accepted for being what it was, but still very fun, right? It's like if there was a sequel to this game, it would be 10 times better if they had the opportunity to do so. But I feel like this is one of the games where like the story and the culmination of events and how things happen and the ridiculous amount of excitement that they build up throughout all the shit is great, dude. Like it's like one of those games that I can completely acknowledge that this game is not good, right? Asura's Wrath is not that good of a game. I would argue it's like a 6 out of 10 if I was being critical. But if I'm not being critical, I would say this is like a 9 out of 10. This is like one of those games that I personally like really love, and I could find reason to play it again and have absolutely no problem with it. Granted, the gameplay parts of it, like the raw gameplay parts of it, I don't think are, you know, the best ever. But a lot of the build up to the QTEs and the crazy ass moments, and the fact that we got to experience the game in like 4K because of PlayStation 3 emulation was godlike, right? The fact that we actually got to see all this stuff running at a very, very, very good looking fidelity, because this game has terrible screen tearing on the PS3 and 360, was super cool, man. It was just nice to see how good looking Asura's Wrath actually is, even though it's a game from 10 years ago. I mean, we got to experience once again the final boss, which this game has one of the greatest final boss fights, I think, of all of games. It was just incredibly friggin' cool. I don't know, man. There's a lot to love. There's a lot to love. I think I actually have to give a nomination to Sifu. This game was great. And then mods showed up and it made it seem like you could definitely play this game again with mods and stuff like that. I think I haven't played it since it came out, but like an actual really enjoyable experience. I don't know. I think I would give it best fighting game for what they set up and what they were executing and how small the team was. This shit was great, man. You know what? I feel like there's a couple of games on here that I was going to give my game of the year noms to, that I was sitting on, and one of them was Stray, and I was thinking about Stray, and I was like, did I really like Stray that much? I don't know. I have to look at the rest of the year. But now that I'm analyzing my year and the games that had an impact on me, I'm feeling like Sifu might have gone down as a bit more than Stray, just because of gameplay reasons, right? Stray was a game that leaves like a great impression because it's got a nice little tightly knit story, and it ends up being a lot of fun as a result. It's like, oh, this is great. Like, it feels like this little adventure, and it's a nice little story, and it wraps itself up very well. Sifu is not really that. There is a story. It's not like, to me, the story wasn't as impactful or anything of that nature, like similar to Stray. I thought Stray's story was much better. But the gameplay in Sifu was great, dude. And they try to do combat in some different ways that isn't shitty, right? They actually, like, let's get a fight that actually looks cool. They try to, like, you know, engage this like super heavy dodge combat and strike focused combat. I still wish it went a little further in the fantastical. And granted, what we're looking at is super fantastical, right? This is crazy fantastical. The enemies you fight are super fantastical, but your character isn't. So you get like these rooted in reality sort of moves and attacks that your character does. And I almost wish we can push it, right? I almost wish we can push like crazy slow-mo and like huge jumps and all this like nutty, crazy video game shit. I almost wish that happened. And it makes me hopeful for the future that if these devs do get a hold of like a franchise or something like that, my God, dude, what if these guys got like a Matrix game or something like that? It would be incredibly friggin' cool. So I really liked Sifu. From the little bit of time that I played it and until we eventually beat it, I don't think I did absolutely everything in the game, but I feel like its combat and the way it essentially presents itself did leave an impression. And I hope that these guys do eventually make more in either a similar world or with different franchises, because it's fun, dude. Oh, I see one that I definitely want to nominate for Game of the Year. Dang, I don't know if this is going to be a top 5 games of the year. I have to give props to Bloodborne PSX. This game was a big ladder. This game was fantastic. Oh my God. So once again, not an official release, a fan-made game that came out earlier this year was essentially like a bite-sized portion of Bloodborne. Wasn't the full Bloodborne experience, mind you. But it was fantastic. Like, it was crazy how similar it was to regular Bloodborne. Shut up. It was crazy how similar it was to regular Bloodborne in functionality, even though designed to work like a PlayStation. And it wasn't on a PlayStation. It was actually on like Unreal Engine. So they did have the advantage of, you know, utilizing a whole bunch of other stuff. Look at this crazy shit. I really liked the new stuff in Bloodborne demake. Yes, yeah, that's the best way to call it, Bloodborne demake. I think the new stuff that they added eventually in the game, which focuses around some characters that you don't get a lot of backstory on in the original Bloodborne, was really good. And that's essentially the culmination. The final battle is that. Yeah, the final battle I thought was actually kind of dope. And they did a great job. And not to mention the fact that there was a ton of color filters, there was a ton of like options, there was a ridiculous amount of customization that you could do to the game to like tailor it to your experience, like how you wanted to experience it. You can have high frame rate, you can have it at old PlayStation frame rate, you can put on filters, like you could do all that stuff. And it was crazy. The nice part is that I think the same dev is working on Bloodborne Kart right now. I don't know if that's a joke. You see an update every once in a while, but it's actually like a Bloodborne kart racer. And it's like the memes have become reality at this point. I feel like all these demake things are kind of hilarious and cool, and I almost wish that this stuff had like an official place in some way and Sony would recognize them. But I guess it's just nice that they're just not taking them down. You know, we've seen that happen in the past where people make some really cool shit, and even though they're not selling it, the devs or the publishers come after them. This was fantastic. As a Bloodborne fan, as someone that really enjoys this franchise, this felt like we were actually getting new Bloodborne content in 2022. And that's kind of wild to think about. This stupid game was so good. And it's funny how Miyazaki has even come out and said that we don't know the exact thing that resulted in Elden Ring's absolute astronomical success, so don't expect us to repeat it. Like, it's almost like, and I was saying this for several times as we were playing it, FromSoft All-Stars is kind of how I feel it was, where they're just like, oh, we're just going to take everything we've put into every one of our games since like Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2 and even Dark Souls 1, cram it all into one game, give you a big ass open world with a bunch of crazy shit, and let's just see what people do with it. And yeah, like, it was pretty hilarious the amount of freedom you had in that first like month of the game. There was a ridiculous amount of stuff that you could do. But just the fact that you had more mobility, there was a jump button, you get a horse, like so many things of Elden Ring are natural evolutions of the Souls genre. And if for anybody that is like not, you know, oh, it doesn't line up with Dark Souls, it's just Dark Souls 4. Like, let's be real with each other. It's just Dark Souls 4. And it's Dark Souls and Bloodborne and those games with just more stuff. Do I think that I like it more than Bloodborne? I've said no many times. I think this game is better than Bloodborne. I think it technically has more stuff than Bloodborne, but I personally prefer Bloodborne significantly more. Bloodborne's like my game, right? Elden Ring, like the old Knights and Dragons and stuff like that, I'm not like a huge natural fan of that Dungeons and Dragons sort of like fiction. So Bloodborne was cool to me because it was different, but it doesn't take away the fact that this game was incredible. Like, it was an improvement on every single one of like the Souls games, almost in every single way. So to me, I feel like the experience of Elden Ring is greater in its sum than any individual moment, because while there is a lot of really cool individual moments, like just stuff like this, just going around and finding weird shit in the world, just turning a corner and finding something that you've never seen before, happened over and over and over and over again, that it was bonkers, right? It was funny because you're already familiar with how all things work in Souls games, and yeah, since it's a Souls game, all things are kind of working the same. But the way they're presenting things to the player and how they open up the combat and how they open up the world is just... I feel like what people felt like when they were playing The Legend of Zelda for the first time on the Nintendo in the 80s, you know? Especially in that first, you know, the first couple weeks where we didn't know anything. Where like the first playthroughs of Elden Ring were truly something special, where you would find something and then share it with your friend and figure that out and just be like, I feel like that is the natural virality of what caused Elden Ring to be as big as it was. The world in itself felt like a character, right? I don't even feel like, what part of Elden Ring do you like the most about it? The world. I feel like just exploring this world for the first time was an absolute treat. The weird thing is that I've thought about going back and playing it when we're not busy or something like that. and it almost seems daunting, right? When you don't have the perspective of what's ahead of you, it almost seems like daunting that there is going to be so much shit to go and discover and do and look at, and you have to specifically like close your eyes to it, you know? It almost feels like it's too much now that I have the perspective of knowledge if I want to go back and play it again. But to me, on first playthrough, it wasn't that bad because I was like fascinated by what weird, crazy thing they were going to throw at me in around the next corner, in the next biome, or whatever the heck we're going to call it, right? So truly impressive. Like, there's a reason why it's talked about so highly amongst so many people. It's a naturally difficult game that gives players a ridiculous amount of variety and options as a player, with the freedom of exploration, but also the godlike level design that the majority of Souls games are sort of known for. And while it doesn't have as much of that as other Souls games, it sort of gives you a big open world and, you know, confounds that to dungeons and the bigger castles and stuff like that. You still get that. You still get like these absolutely amazing castles and passageways and things that are specifically designed to blow your mind, you know, when you come across this shit. I love it, right? I feel like I had all the crazy mystical exploration feelings I had when I played Dark Souls 1 for the first time, when I played Bloodborne for the first time, on a huge scale, like an absolute massive scale. And I don't know where the hell Miyazaki goes from here. I'm assuming it's going to be into Elden Ring DLC, and we'll probably be playing more of this in the near future. I got it. I got a nomination for Game of the Year. Hold on a second. As a personal huge House of the Dead fan, right? This is actually one of my favorite games there is. I have a House of the Dead friggin' arcade cabinet. I have to give one of my nominations this year to House of the Dead remake. Like, we got a spiritual successor / remake of the original House of the Dead that was essentially built from the ground up, and it was awesome. I feel like the only negative of this game was the music, and they might not have gotten the licensing to the music or something like that, which prevented them from which prevented some of the wonderful classical tracks from being used. As soon as this came out on PC and we actually had our PC light guns to use on it, oh my god, dude, I was in heaven. It was so much fun, and it goes to show how good of a game the original House of the Dead is, and it still holds up to this day. Like, look how good this stuff looks. Jeez, dude. Forever Entertainment also put out Panzer Dragoon, and that's another huge fan favorite series of mine. I'm a Saturn enjoyer, right? So of course I love Panzer Dragoon. So I feel like I am super down for the future of House of the Dead. These guys are supposed to be making House of the Dead 2. They're supposed to also be making Panzer Dragoon 2. And considering how good the PC version of House of the Dead came out, much less the Switch version was functional at least, I was truly impressed. So anyway, I'm just very happy that stuff like this exists. This isn't an official Sega game. It's like licensed from Sega, but it's made by devs that just liked House of the Dead, and they're doing a bunch of remakes right now. They're doing a bunch of remakes with like Front Mission for Square Enix titles, as well as Sega. And it's just a good idea because they're good, man. Panzer Dragoon was rough at the start, but dude, eventually it was fantastic. Like, within a few weeks, they fixed a lot of the problems, and it was significantly better. So, yeah, I have a personal big soft spot this year for the fact that I got to enjoy House of the Dead all over again. And it seemed like a ton of people did too. Like, the videos that I put up on it and the streams that we had of it were crazy, man. They were fucking popping. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy that so many people still care about House of the Dead in 2022. So for the first time in my life, I got to play a little game called Def Jam Fight for New York. And while I've played the multiplayer of this game several times throughout several years, right? This was my first time ever playing through the story mode of this game. And I quickly understood why, from a casual level to an expert level to an overall understanding of what Def Jam Fight for New York is, I quickly realized why people love this shit so much. It was almost like immediately apparent when you play through Def Jam why this shit is good. Number one, gameplay wise, let's just get first credit, gameplay. an insane amount of styles you have in the game that allows your character to play certain ways. That's because the game, once again, was like a wrestling all-stars game, kind of taking from Aki, I believe was the developer, from almost every wrestling name that they had before this. They just threw it all into this game. Like, everything was here. So you get a ton of different ways that your character can actually play. You get a lot of customization for your character visually. There's a shop, you get to buy clothes and tattoos and all this stuff. But not just that, you combine the customization, the style, and then you can start mixing and matching stuff that will also affect gameplay. Like, no kidding, you can take a style and mix it with multiple other styles and to create a new and unique style that has a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Dude, this game was bonkers. And the fact is, the story mode was legit good. And this was something we were sort of predicting early on. I'm trying to find a shot of it. Yeah, we get these shots right here, which is the world map, right? And you just essentially go to different districts and just pick a place and fight and get cutscenes every once in a while. Dude, I thought Street Fighter was going to do something like this. But they're not. They're actually doing the big open world thing, sort of like very large environment, going around looking at stuff. But even this was, damn, that good old Jesus tattoo. Even this was good enough. Like, you did not need that much more. It really felt like this game arguably has some of the best single player content / story mode of any fighting game I've ever played, which is nuts. Like, this is comparable to modern day NRS in my personal opinion. And it also just helps the fact that, yes, it's cheesy. Yes, it's like mid 2000s, you know, mid 2000s cheese, but it is so much fun. It's hilarious how the game does not take itself seriously either. So you get, like, you know, Ice Cube as he kicks your ass. He calls your he calls like your friends a bitch and your mama's a hoe. And it's like, whoa, like this is wild, dude. And the fact that it features so many like prominent celebrities and rappers and everything. Did I say Ice Cube? Sorry, Ice-T. The fact that it features so many prominent celebrities and actors and shit is fucking nuts. A game that literally can't exist nowadays. And that's the important thing I think that Def Jam Fight for New York sort of represents. This is like a fever dream. I'm dressed as fucking Jackie Bryant. This is like a fever dream game that could only happen before the big age of copyright and licensing would take over like the industry. And my God, man, like they made the most killer game out of all of it. It had so much depth, gameplay wise, had so many great characters. The roster's insane. It's literally Smash Brothers, but with like rap characters and celebrities. It's amazing. If you've never played Def Jam Fight for New York, the game is fucking timeless. And even if you're not like a wrestling games fan, there's a ton of very fighting gamey stuff in here because Aki is a Japanese developer, right? And there's a lot of rooted old school wrestling feel in this game with a lot of modern like fighting game like ticks and notches that they use throughout the history of them making games. It was great. I'll never forget it. Our character's story, which can also change as you pick certain options, was fantastic. The dark arc I will never forget. You know what? I would like to give a small nod to Shredder's Revenge, even though I'm not a huge Ninja Turtles fan, but this game was made with so much love, care, and attention, it was stupid. So much love, care, and attention that it was stupid. And the fact that I think it got updated and it got even better, right? I don't even have much to say about it other than the fact that it was just great. It's like these modern day takes on beat 'em ups and shit have been fantastic between Streets of Rage and this and several other games. It's just great, man. It's a game that like has to be in your library, and the fact that it supports like so many players is also fantastic. I'm not even a Ninja Turtles fan, like really. I know them. I had some toys, but was ever like I mean, arguably, I liked Transformers more when I was younger. Aliens Fireteam update was great. So they added a proper boss fight. This is still arguably one of the best action Aliens games ever made. And this final area boss fight was awesome. I genuinely enjoyed it as an Aliens fan. As somebody that has always wanted great like Aliens games, which there hasn't been a ton of. There's a great Alien game in Alien Isolation. This game was stupid fun, and I feel like they were able to even execute better than what they had before on the DLC expansion by adding the stuff that like was obviously missing from the beginning. So I'm really looking forward to what the studio puts out next. Here's a shot of the the giant queen thing that we fight in the end. It was great, dude. It's so much fun. And there's like a ton of customization, a ton of build variety, a ton of gun variety. They put in a lot of stuff that you can like grind and do if you want to. So once again, I have to give it props. Loved my time with it, had a great time, and I'm looking forward to whatever they put out next. In 2022, could you believe that we went online with a Dreamcast and played Phantasy Star Online? Could you believe that this is a Dreamcast that is online running PSO? And we ran in and we're just playing with people like it was the early 2000s. And no kidding, it was still great. It was still ridiculously fun. It was still good. So yeah, I got to re-experience PSO. We did PvP. It was hilarious, man, and it friggin' worked. That was the craziest part, is that a lot of this nutty shit that we did actually worked, and we were able to have a functional experience playing a near 20+ year online game. So PSO gets a ton of credit, right? Just a ton of credit for me personally, that still, after so many years, we can go back and experience it the exact same way that I experienced it back in the day, and it's still super fun. I'm blown away. Oh, y'all gonna hate me for this shit. Y'all gonna hate me for this shit. Scorn it up, bros. Scorn it up, bros. So once again, I feel like this game is right on the same level of Stray, but obviously different, right? But it's a super artsy game that is trying to be super artsy, is very limited in gameplay stuff. It's mostly just a puzzle game. And how it executes its art is like masterful, right? So Scorn and Stray are almost like the epitome of that. They're crazy good at that shit. I just have like a personal like attachment to this because H.R. Giger's artwork influenced Alien, right? H.R. Giger's artwork was crazy and weird and nightmarish and all this crazy shit, and they actually were able to make it happen. They made a game that just looked like his artwork in every single way, which is not an easy feat to do. And they spent a lot of time on the art in this game, and I just have to give it credit. Well, I don't think it's like the best game of the year, but I don't think, if you've played through Scorn, I don't think you're gonna forget it anytime soon. If you liked Stray, you have to play Scorn. That's definitely good advice. Oh yeah, we played Symphony of the Night this year, and I really enjoyed it. I actually did like this game a lot, but I can't help but to compare it to a game like Super Metroid. I can't help it, and I really like Super Metroid more. As far as like old Metroidvania like type of games, right, that I have not played, I just feel like, at the end of all things, yeah, Super Metroid is a bit of a tighter experience. While this game was super good, it's like this game is like a 9 out of 10. I felt like Super Metroid was a 10. I'm like, oh, this game is awesome, dude. I just love this shit. I feel like it comes down to personal taste and preference, which one you might like more than the other in some way, because they're both such high quality games. The one thing that definitely was tough about Soden is that when you get lost, you get really lost, and there is like, it takes a very long time to get from point A to point B when you're moving around the castle. And that's just because like I'm unfamiliar with the game and I'm having to figure this shit out. And on a first playthrough, I feel like it might be much better on a subsequent playthrough. But sometimes it was just like, oh, I just gotta run through here and do this again and run across the whole fucking castle. Like, oh, okay. I don't feel like that happened as much in Super Metroid. Either way, I thought Soden was great. I'm glad we played. I'm glad I finally have played this game after so many years. Under the same breath, I have to give credit to two different games here. My next Game of the Year nomination goes to Randomizers. Oh man, Randomizers. And this year's specifically, we played through Resident Evil 4. This year specifically, we played RE4 Randomizer. I've played through Resident Evil 1 Randomizer before, and it was really fun. And we also played through a lot of effort, a Bloodborne Randomizer. And this shit was magical, right? I think this full playthrough has not actually gone up on YouTube yet. So for anybody that's like watching this in the future on YouTube, it'll be up there soon. Yes, this was the absolutely magical of an experience. And I feel like for the future, if games do get re-released in some way, that can have like a functionality of randomization put into it, they should just do it, man. I feel like randomizers should get official support in the future, especially for like, I almost wish Demon Souls got like a randomizer in some way. It's so good. And the fact that the randomizer itself has a lot of options and it's set up for so many crazy scenarios and situations you would never run into in the original Bloodborne, I felt like I was playing a game again for like the first time. I just have to give a big shout out to randomizers in general and the people that put randomizers together. There is so much weird shit, as you're watching it right now, weird shit that took place on this playthrough that I loved it, man. I just absolutely loved it. So I feel like God of War is an interesting game to me because I've said this before when we talked about the review of God of War Ragnarok. I didn't do absolutely everything in this game either. But I beat it, and I feel like I came across as many submissions as I possibly could, and I just did them. If I was looking, like if I was just trying to move my way through the game and there was a submission, I would play it. This game improves upon the previous God of War almost in every single way, right? Like the previous God of War almost feels like it would be hard to go back to now because of the gameplay increases, the improvements in gameplay in this game. And I feel that's actually true. I use the comparison of Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal. And the big thing about Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal is that, yes, by you playing Doom Eternal, you're essentially ruining your ability to play Doom 2016 again. Like, your character can do so much less. The game just doesn't feel as good. There's just so many things about it that are substantial improvements over the next game. Everything is better, practically. I feel that's the same thing for God of War Ragnarok. But I prefer Doom 2016, personally. I also personally prefer God of War 2018. I feel like there's something about like the simplicity of the first game and the newness of it that really leaves like a substantial impression, even though I can absolutely agree everything's better. Like, you should 100% play it. Like, both games, the Doom games, as well as God of War, because these games have some pretty similar similarities. They change shit up like crazy, right? They're both fantastic in every single way, and you should go through them. And there's so much content that they're fucking great, right? But at the same point, it's like, I feel like that personal story that they were trying to tell in God of War 2018, as well as like, you know, you discovering this shit that they were throwing at you. It felt like in God of War Ragnarok, we're sort of rediscovering that stuff. And then we get some new things, you know? We get some new stuff along the way in terms of like gameplay and world exploration. So anyway, I think God of War Ragnarok is arguably like the second best game of the year. For so many different reasons. But if we're to talk about like what is actually my game of the year, and I was like, what do I even say? Like, I don't even know if I could say much about God of War Ragnarok that hasn't already been said like over and over and over again by a ton of people. It's fantastic. It's just, I feel like the experience that I had with something like Elden Ring, even though Elden Ring is just a rehash of like old shit gameplay wise, it also is like old shit but new, right? Old shit but does stuff in new crazy ways that made me feel like, oh my god, I feel like I'm playing a Souls game for the first time. I don't know, maybe it's just something about that experience that I really enjoy and I love. That exploration kind of shit. I still have to say that at the end of all things, my personal game of the year is Elden Ring. I feel like a lot of people are echoing sort of like a similar like sentiment where it's like, yeah, God of War Ragnarok is clearly incredible and like a better game than the first one, but it seems like a lot of people just like the first one. I don't know about Elden Ring. It's weird now. Like, I would like to say I could just play through this game again, but at the same time, like how great is a game if you immediately want to play it over again? Like, does that mean a game is great? Does that mean that that's like your game of the year? How replayability and stuff like that? To me, I don't know. Like, it's hard to say if replayability ends up being a thing that is like, oh yeah, like if you want to play through a game 15 times or something like that, does that make it like a game of the year sort of material? I don't know if Elden Ring has the replayability of other Souls games. I actually don't know, because I haven't gone back to it with, you know, time. But I can say the first time experience for Elden Ring, at least for me personally, it took forever. It felt like it took 2 months to get through this 140 to 160 hour playthrough. It felt like we were there forever, but I never felt like it was a slog. And I don't think I can say the same for everybody else, but I do feel like it always felt fresh and crazy and weird. And the only times where I think I was feeling that is in the dungeons. The arguable repeated dungeons, and every time I felt that in the dungeons would throw something at me that had not been done before. Like, I remember the one time, and I was like, man, we've gone through a lot of these friggin' dungeons and done some lever pull and then ran across here. Man, we've done this a lot. And then we get to a dungeon that is like a maze, and it like literally is there to mess with you, to look like you've been here, but you actually haven't been here. So the dungeon started doing some interesting stuff. I felt like that happened at the perfect time, you know, where I can recognize, yeah, we've been doing this a lot, and all of a sudden there was some newness that got thrown in. My number 1 game of the year is Elden Ring. My number 2 game of the year is God of War Ragnarok. I think my third spot, which is the tough one, because obviously Elden Ring and God of War are like the big 2. I no shit think I would probably give my next spot to the goddamn Def Jam playthrough. And while it is an old game, it's my personal game of the year. Holy shit, man.